Welcome back to the Making the Madness college basketball podcast. This is Jonathan here with Sean. We're going to be kind of doing something different this offseason. This week has been pretty uneventful. I guess we have Jacob Young, who is heading to Oregon, which we narrowly missed on the last podcast. So, I mean, we all
by
we
like an hour.
yeah we almost got it. So if he would have just committed a day earlier, we would have had like essentially no good news to do. So what we're going to do, we each release some. I released a early season bracketology. You released your way too early top 25. We're going to talk some teams we disagree on, teams we agree on. We have some teams we do agree on. We can talk up those teams. Talk about how Iona deserves to be, a top four team in the preseason polls. Different stuff like that. And it should be, I think, a good kind of mix up because most of the time we're just like constantly talking transfers. How does this team impact this team, and where does X transfer mix in? And I think this is kind of just a good mix up to say we're not going to do this. We're going to discuss where should teams be ranked. So Sean, how are you doing tonight? Where should Iona be ranked?
I'm doing great. I would be doing better if my dogs weren't barking at the moment. They always have the worst timing for barking. As soon as you start a podcast, they just love to bark. But looking at Iona, yeah, I mean, I said earlier in the week that I think that they are going to go undefeated in the MAC, and I don't think that's crazy. The only arguments that I've seen is that it's hard to do, which it is hard to do to go undefeated in an entire conference season in 20 games. It's not easy to do. Winning 20 consecutive isn't easy, but I don't see a game that they're going to lose. I just don't. They're going to be favored in every single conference game. There's not a single, like, Ryder should be solid. They get Demencio Vaughn back. DJ Murray, he's solid. They added some good pieces also in the portal besides Demencio Vaughn. Monmouth should be solid to get George Pappas back. You get Shavar Reynolds. Siena lost Jalen Pickett and Manny Camper, but they return Jackson Stormo. They return Aiden Carpenter. They add Jordan Kellier from Utah. So they add some pieces, but then you look at St. Peter's, they lost Casey Nadefo, their best player. Iona, they did lose Isaiah Ross, who averaged 20 points a game last season, but they had Tyson Jolly, a guy who averaged 15 points per game 2 seasons ago at SMU. You add Elijah Joyner from Tulsa, 10 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game last season for Tulsa. You add a pretty solid stretch four with Quinn Slazinski from Louisville. You have Berg Jean Louis returning, who is one of the best defenders in all of college basketball, really 6'5", really athletic, and he's just going to defend your best perimeter player and lock him down every single time. And then you also have Dylan Von Eyck returning next to Quinn Slazinski. Those two will split minutes at the 4. And at the 5, you have Nelly Jr. Joseph, who averaged nearly a double-double during his freshman season. Really impressive young player that'll only rise throughout his career. Rick Pitino is going to get the best out of him. And, oh yeah, by the way, like I said, Rick Pitino is their head coach. So they have a top 10 coach in college basketball history. That's undisputable, I feel like. You could even argue top 5, and I wouldn't argue that at all. So you have Rick Pitino and a fantastic roster. They're by far and away the best team in their conference, and them going undefeated in conference play isn't even that much of a hot take in my eyes.
Yeah, I would definitely say not hot talk. Now, if you're saying Iona, we I guess have to wait on the non-conference schedule. But if you say Iona is going to go undefeated on the season, win the national champ, like there's a line here. Like Iona, I don't think is anything more than maybe a team that could go Oral Roberts and make it to the Sweet 16. I think that's probably at most their ceiling, and they're probably not quite that good. But I mean, you look at this team, you have high major talent Elijah Joyner, high major talent Tyson Jolly, high major talent Quinn Slazinski. Those are players who, you know, at higher level schools, than the MAC level. And I love the MAC, don't get me wrong, but these are players that at a higher level of basketball were on the court, you know, playing big minutes. Tyson Jolly was certainly big at SMU. Elijah
Tyson Jolly
Joyner,
started his career at Baylor. They just won the championship.
yeah. Now, obviously, the Baylor career didn't work out for Tyson
It
Jolly,
it didn't,
but
but he went there.
yeah, but
He did go there.
he rebounded, went to SMU, and was a stud there. Elijah Joyner, who can forget it, the memorable shot he hit against Wichita State?
That
Uh,
was an awesome shot. And the
yeah,
story behind it, like it was I think like the first college game or first game his father had been to in like a long time. Just a super emotional game winner. That was
yeah,
one of my favorite moments of the 2019-2020 season.
yeah. The 20, that was a memorable season up until
I don't want to
Jokic.
talk about it.
Yeah, we forget about it. That we're gonna still play the NCAA tournament for 2020. It's coming soon.
Can't we just crown Dayton? Like, can't we just be like Dayton won? It's all good.
I think what we need to do is have the players play the games and have
Yeah.
the coaches coach the games. And we're going to do it this summer. We're going to, let the NBA have their thing. And then, after the NBA draft, we're just going to take all the players and we're going to play the games.
Mm-hmm. You know how I say Dayton should be crowned? I'm mostly joking, but like I feel like Kansas would have so easily have cruised to a championship. I mean, that was just such a good team.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas could have Gonzaga, like they lost to BYU. So I mean, they did, have the losing off their backs. They could have won
That game
it.
was electric too.
Yeah, that was an incredible game. BYU could have won it. I mean,
They
they
could.
did
Hey,
beat Gonzaga.
BYU was incredibly underrated. They would have been like a 5 or a 6, but that team could drop 90 on anybody with their shooting. Jake Toolson was just such a difference maker.
Baylor would not have won it. Davion Mitchell wasn't shooting. Now, if they did play with all the same teams this upcoming summer, Baylor would probably win it, but they wouldn't have won at the time in 2020.
Yeah, Davion. I feel like people forget that Davion Mitchell was a really bad 3-point shooter every year of his career except for last year. Like he was a liability from outside.
Yeah,
Like he was always that guy that's going to be an elite defender. He can make plays, but he could not shoot. We shot him, he just didn't make them. So like the way he was able to progress this season, I feel like isn't talked about nearly enough.
yeah. It was, I think, one of the rather like more impressive because he did like all the other glue guy things that he does so well. Like he was a terrific defender. He was, a good passer. And his issue is he'd like shoot a bunch of shots that he, of course, now made. And you're like, why is he shooting this shot? He's like a 29% 3-point shooter. Why is he shooting this shot? And then he becomes like a 45% shooter. He's like, oh, yeah, that's why he's shooting the shots. Uh,
And by the
our,
way, we said that Davion Mitchell was Baylor's most important player back in like January before it was cool.
yeah, we did say that. Auburn would have been
It's
upset in the first round in 2020. I'm saying that right now.
mhm.
They were number one on the 2020 fraud power rankings.
Oh, you know who's number one on the fraud power rankings right now for the 2021-2022 season?
Um, let's see here.
You don't have to look far. Last year I had Ohio State there. I feel
All
like
right,
that ended up working out pretty well.
they
Like they
lost
were
to
good.
Max A. Smiths. I mean, they lost to the
And Kevin
best team.
O'Banner. Let's not.
I mean, the best 15 seed in NCAA tournament history. I mean, how can you fault them for that?
That's true. That's
But
true. I mean, Dwayne Washington, as we're talking, is probably still missing threes. I mean, that was just a bad game by him.
let's see the fraud power rankings. You know who I think is going to be heavily overrated? Virginia.
Let's hear it. I
Virginia.
agree. Actually, I don't even have them like in my top 40 if I were to rank a top 40. I just, that team is still my biggest knock on them, and I feel like pretty much everybody's biggest knock on them last year was just they could really shoot the ball. I mean, you had Trey Murphy, Jay Huff, Sam Hauser. Those three are all really good shooters, but they just lack a point guard that can just get his own bucket. Kihei Clark's not that guy. He would rather defer and pass the ball. He's like kind of like Andre Miller when Andre Miller was in the NBA for 40 years. So like, and Andre Miller, great player obviously, but that's just not the kind of guy you really want leading your team all the time. And Kihei Clark like I said, solid. But you lose Trey Murphy, he could end up being a lottery pick. I love his talent quite a bit. You lose Sam Hauser, you lose Jay Huff, and they didn't add a point guard that can get his own shot. Like they're going to have to rely on that being Reese Beekman, and I just don't think that's going to be what he does. Like I think he can average close to double figures, but I don't think he's a guy that's going to be able to get his own shot every possession down the stretch in a game. I just don't think it's going to be him. And can you play? And Kie Clark's going to play a lot of minutes still. So I just think if you could have gotten someone from the portal, there's a lot of options that could get their own shot that would have been huge for Virginia. That didn't happen, and the roster got a lot worse. I like Jaden Gardner coming in from East Carolina. He's been a very big time scorer and a rebounder throughout his career. He's only 6'7", but plays far bigger. He's just a really bulky big man that can create space inside using his strength. He's really good in the mid range. He, has really good feel for the game inside the post. So let's see how that translates to ACC. I think he'll be just fine. And then you also had Armaan Franklin, the transfer from Indiana. That's a shooter to replace Trey Murphy. He's a lot smaller than Trey Murphy. That's a guy on the wing who can knock down threes when he gets, a good look. He can knock down a lot of different threes. And then when you look at the 5 spot, you're going to have to rely on Francisco Cafaro, a 7-footer who just hasn't played that much. He redshirted his first season. He didn't play a ton last year. So you're going to have to rely on him, or you can go with Jaden Gardner at the 5, but he's too small to play the 5 at the ACC level. Maybe you go Caden Shedrick, who I believe he also redshirted his first season. So you have a lot of unknowns at the 5. You don't have a point guard that can create. And other than Tony Bennett, that's the only part of this team I really like. Their head coach. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. Kie Clark, we know what he is. He's good passer. Can make excellent reads with the game on the line, down by 2, and throwing it to Diakite. But I mean that Kie Clark can only take you so far. Jane Gardner is who Jane Gardner is. He's a very good player, but I don't think he's an all ACC level player. Kie Clark's not an all ACC level player. Armaan Franklin, not an all ACC level player, probably not even close to it. Can knock down threes, but I mean, he is who he is. Francisco Cafaro, 7 foot. We haven't really seen much out of him. And then, really, I think the only hope for Virginia really being a great team or, an NCAA tournament level team is a big breakout season from Reese Beekman. I think he has the potential.
Mm-hmm.
He showed it in flashes last year. If Virginia is going to be like a top 25 team, it's going to be because Reese Beekman, elevates his game and becomes the best player on Virginia. I have my questions about that. But when Kyle Guy was being, Mr. Man Bun in his freshman year, we
I
didn't
mean,
think
come
the
on,
next
the
year
man bun. He could really rock the man bun though. Let's not
yeah,
lie here.
we didn't think he'd be the best player on Virginia the following season, and he became that. And then, of course, DeAndre Hunter decided to become better than him, but that's beside the
Mm-hmm.
point. Reese Beekman, maybe he takes that big of a jump. We'll see. But unless he does that, there's not a whole lot to like with this Virginia team, just on paper, other than Tony Bennett, which you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean Tony Bennett undoubtedly is a top 5 coach in the game, and they're going to make the tournament, I would assume, just because Tony Bennett's their head coach. But 2 years ago, they were a dreadful shooting team from outside. I think we're going to see more of those issues again because Hauser's gone. He was a 40% shooter. Murphy, 40% shooter. Wilda Tensei, 40% shooter. All 3 of those guys, and Huff was like 36. So he was almost 42. So you're losing 4 really good shooters, and you add one shooter and Armaan Franklin. Jaden Gardner's not a shooter from outside. That's just not his game. And I just don't see where it is with this team. I'm not buying them. I'm selling all the Virginia stock there is. They'll probably make the tournament as like an 8 or a 9 seed, and they'll lose in the first round like Clemson did last year. I think Clemson was a 10 seed. But I just don't buy this team. I agree with you. They're going to be one of the more overrated teams, but they'll luck into some wins because Tony Bennett is a fantastic head coach.
Speaking of Clemson, I don't know if we really deserve to talk about them, but they're going to suck as well.
Uh,
I'm out on them.
Clemson?
Yeah.
Is anybody talking about them being good? They were terrible when Amir Sims didn't play last year. I believe our boy Jim Root from Three Man Weavy posted a really good stat on his Twitter somewhere a few months ago or a few weeks ago about how bad Clemson was without Amir Sims, but it was like mind-boggling how terrible they were when he wasn't on the floor. They had Naz Bohannon from Youngstown State, who should be solid, maybe like 12 a game, 6 boards, but he's nowhere near as good as Amir Sims. You also add David Collins from South Florida. That's a solid add, but this team is not very good.
Yeah, I I think they'll be a bottom 4 or 5 ACC team. I'm not
Does
too sold
Clemson
on
make
them.
a coaching change?
Do enough people care about Clemson basketball?
See, probably not, but like also like they were like not I didn't buy them at all this season. They were good for a minute, then Virginia beat them by like 40. I'm like, yeah, this team's been, playing with fire for 2 months. They won a bunch of games close that they shouldn't have won, and their offense was terrible all season. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the ACC, probably bottom three or bottom four. And Brad Brownell's seat is going to be extremely warm.
Yeah, or my nickname, Bad Brownell, because he stinks.
Yeah, we're back to
Get him
that
out
for
of here.
sure. Like that, like he could be one of those coaches that just goes to another job to avoid being fired, like Shaka Smart. Like I doubt Brad Brownell's gonna get a high major offer, but maybe he goes. What's the term? They parachutes down to a mid major school. That wouldn't necessarily surprise me. And Clemson looks in another direction because I feel like the program's just kind of at a point where they're just super stagnant right now. Last year they were good for a minute and then they were terrible. They lost in the NCAA tournament to Rutgers, a team that was also really bad down the stretch. They now lose their best player to the NBA draft, obviously, and they have a below average roster next year too.
Yeah. Um, One team I'm kind of high on. I'm kind of in on the Kansas State bandwagon. I know you talked about them earlier this offseason. I think Nigel Pack is a player that's going
Mm.
to really take a big step forward. Uh, he's and you look at Kansas State, you throw out all the games before the last five. The last 5 games they really pushed Baylor. They beat Oklahoma. They were playing at a pretty good level. I know they sucked for most of the season, but Mike McGurl,
Hey, we
Nigel
ignore the
Pack,
first 3 months of the season.
yeah, that's a good guard tandem. They obviously, I think, clearly won the Mark Smith trade. Devian Bradford is a big time player, so I mean, I like this Kansas State team to really take a step forward. I know you liked them talking earlier. They were in my bracketology. I think it was maybe higher than anyone else had them, but uh, yeah, I think they'll be a top 40 team next year. Mark it down.
Yeah, they'd be a top 50 team for me right now if I did a top 50, maybe top 40 borderline for sure. I think they're a tournament team. I love what you said about Nigel Pack. He's a guy I like a lot, could be in contention for Big 12 all first team. I think they do 5 players. If they do more than that, then it doesn't count. Marquise Noel, he was the Sun Belt Player of the Year 2 seasons ago. Struggled at points this season, and then decided to transfer late in the year. But he's a guy that can pull up from like 32 feet and just nail it. But he also takes a lot of weird shots. But he's super speedy. He's only 5'7", but he can definitely get a shot when you need it. I also like Mike McGurl. He's there for 5 seasons. He's played a big role for a number of years. He was a big piece on that Kansas State Elite Eight team, I believe, right? They made it to the Elite Eight
Yeah,
a few years ago off the bench.
2018.
Yeah, with
I think
Barry
so.
Brown, Dean
Yeah,
Wade, Xavier Sneed, McCole Mayween. I was probably there. No, he wasn't. He was there the next 2 years.
he was.
But
No, Maywin was there.
he was? Okay.
Yeah,
And then you get Montavious Murphy back from injury. Davion Bradford, he's not the best defender. He has some ways to go defensively for sure, but he's such a big body, 7 foot 250. He just creates a lot of space with his size. He's really good inside. I think he's going to be a big piece for Kansas State. He had some big games down the stretch. He's definitely going to be a piece for them that breaks out this season. And Selton Miguel is a guy that kind of struggled last year, but had a lot of high praise coming out of the limited amount of practices that Kansas State had last season. Ismail Massoud is a shooter with a lot of size at 6'9", 6'8". I think that Kansas is Kansas State is definitely a tournament level team, and even if they don't make the tournament, it's going to be a vast improvement from what they were last season.
Yeah. And I mean, last season, definitely very rough, but I think they'll be in a good spot heading into next season. Staying in the Big 12, I have a disagreement here, and I noticed this on Twitter. People were complaining about Kansas being
Oh
number
boy.
12.
Oh boy.
I will
Did
say
did
this.
people complain about Kansas? Jeez.
I will say this in your defense. I have them as my number 3 team in my bracketology overall. But in your defense, you do not have Ochai Abaji coming back. So I mean that's a major you know piece that if he is there, then they're obviously much higher. But uh, you know 12th, that's
Yeah.
the one caveat I will say that for that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would have them eighth or ninth if Abaji is back. Jalen Coleman lands. He was a good shooter last year, and he was like his first year in 2015, and then the next like 5 years he just wasn't a good shooter. So Jalen Coleman lands. If he can shoot the ball good, he'll be a solid player. But last year they had Marcus Garrett running the point. They addressed that this season by adding Remy Martin from Arizona State and Joe Yesufu from Drake. The only thing about that is I'm just not sure how that dynamic works. Neither is a guy that wants to pass the ball very often. They both look for their own shots frequently. Remy Martin takes a ton of shots, a lot of them that you're like, well, that's a pretty bad shot. But if he makes it, hey, it's a good shot. He made it, 3 points on the board. Who cares? I don't think that's going to really fly at Kansas, though. Bobby Hurley let his guards do whatever they really want, and that's just the style they play at Arizona State. He's not going to be able to do that at Kansas. So I'm curious to see how he adjusts his game. So I'm a little, cautiously optimistic, I guess, on what Remy Martin's going to be at Kansas. I think he'll be a very good player. I had some Kansas fans mad I didn't have him on the Big 12 first team. I just don't think he's going to be that kind of player at Kansas. But can Christian Brown be consistent this season? That's a big question for me. Joe Yesufu, like I said, what's he going to be? He was really good down the stretch when Roman Penn got hurt, but he was the lead guard option. That's not what he's going to be at Kansas. He's likely going to come off the bench. David McCormick's a really good player. He had a great last 2.5 months of the season after a rough first month. Jalen Wilson was up and down. He had a really good start. He was a little up and down near the middle of the season, then finished decently strong. He had COVID and missed the first game of the NCAA tournament, so he missed some time there for sure. But I think if he returns after entering the NBA draft, he's going to be one of Kansas's best players for sure. But for a team that I have top five, I try to have this is kind of how I do it. If you're a top five team, I don't have very many questions about your team. I just listed like 6 or 7 questions about Kansas. They're not a top five team for me if I have that many questions.
Yeah, and I'll say this: if Jalen Coleman lands is starting and Ochai Baji is in the NBA, I definitely wouldn't have them top 5. I will say I think Abaji will be back. I'm projecting him to be back. That's a major caveat. If he's back, I think that stirs up a lot of the questions because one, he's I think their best defender heading into next season. Because defensively, some of the questions are, Remy Martin's not necessarily an elite defender. Christian Brown is a solid defender. Jalen Wilson, I, David McCormick, not the greatest defensive, front court, but Abaji can kind of, I think be that guy you kind of say, go guard our number one option, and I think that fits him. I have less questions on Remy Martin. I think he'll fit in rather nicely, especially in a team where he's not the best player on the court, if that kind of makes sense. When he was really, I think, kind of playing his best, maybe some of his best basketball, he was like the third option almost with Arizona State back when they had Trey Holder and Shannon Evans. Those two were better
I
than Remy
agree.
Martin. Was like, okay, I'm just
But
gonna be electric dynamite and do my own thing as well next to those two, and that kind of worked for a little bit. So I think I have less questions about Remy Martin. I do think Bill Self will kind of try to rein him in at least a little bit. Otherwise, maybe he'll start DeJuan Harris. And make Remy Martin show that he needs to be a team player. I think Bill Self is someone that has the ability to do that. But we'll kind of wait and see on Kansas. They're definitely one of those teams. Shouldn't make a definite statement until we know the entire roster situation.
Yeah, definitely. And Remy Martin, like you said, in his freshman season was very good as like the fourth or fifth option on the team. But I just don't think he goes to Kansas if he doesn't expect to be one of the top two options on the team. I just, he could have went anywhere really if he wanted to. He could have stayed at Arizona State and been the top option, but decides to go to Kansas. I just don't think he would have done that, knowing he's like the fifth option on the team. I just can't see that being a thing.
Well, I would say he'd probably be like the third option because I think even if Abaji's in the NBA, McCormick I still think's kind of the number one option on that team, and then Abaji's like the number two. I think those would be the
But
top
who's
two
bringing the
options.
ball up at the end of a game? Who's bringing the ball up with 5 seconds left trying to get that final shot?
Probably Remy Martin.
Exactly. That's just, I don't love that necessarily. And not because he's a bad player. I think he's a very talented player, but he shot 33% from three in 4 years at Arizona State, 75% from the line, which isn't bad by any means, but 42% from the field? Yeah, 42.8. Like, those percentages are not great. They're high volume, that's what he's been throughout his career. A high volume guy who is kind of just chucks up shots at times, but he's very talented and can make really tough shots. And when he gets going, he can really score. He can drop 30 on any night. But when he's cold, he's could drop 5 for 4 straight games, which he did in a stretch this season. I just question if he's going to be able to be that kind of guy at Kansas. And I could end up being wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm very skeptical at the moment.
You know who that sounds a lot like? Christian Brown. Like
Okay, hold on.
he had a couple like I think he had a 30-point game early in the season.
That's
Then
true. That is true.
he's kind of up and down like that. So
But he's a lot less volume than Remy Martin.
that is also true.
He took about like half the amount of shots that Remy Martin did last year.
Except when he got going.
Hey, when Christian Brown gets going, he can drill 9 threes in a game.
Yeah. That's dangerous. Uh
It
last
is.
thing
I
on the
agree.
Big 12. Uh I I want to say this. I'm not necessarily, I'm kind of looking at Baylor and Texas's roster, and I if James Akinjo is there, I kind of like Baylor's roster a little bit better. Just personally speaking, I
Then
think
Texas?
yes, I
Okay.
really
Well,
like
I could see
the
it.
Akinjo Flagler backcourt. I think Kendall Brown is going to be a star. Matthew Mayer is going to take a step forward. JTT is perfect five man. So I really like this Baylor roster. Um, and then I think a lot of what gets talked about is Chris Beard this, Chris Beard that. Scott Drew just won a national championship. Chris Beard, where's your national championship? So, uh, you know, I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna go Baylor over Texas. That's my take here.
Yeah, I don't think it's a hot take at all. I had Texas eighth, I believe. They were top in the Big 12 for me. The roster is good. Andrew Jones and Courtney Ramey both returned. They had Timmy Allen, Dylan Disu, and Christian Bishop. You add Jalen Tyson, a five-star recruit. Devin Askew comes in from Kentucky. Brock Cunningham is back, one of the best glue guys in the country, and Chris Beard I think is a top five. I've said 3 coaches that are top 5 in the country, and there's 2 more that are top 5. I just don't know who I'd say is the other top 5. But Chris Beard I feel like has to be a top 5 coach. He brought Texas Tech to the national championship, and they almost won it. Maybe don't leave DeAndre Hunter wide open in the corner next time, but and he could have had a national championship ring for sure. I think that Texas has a really good roster. They have a really good head coach. They have the best all around coaching staff in the country with the coaches he was able to bring in on his staff alongside himself. Texas, they're a team that I think could win. I think Chris Beard's going to win a national championship at Texas by 2027.
All right, 2027. Bookmark it down. As that's 6 years of NCAA tournaments.
5.
So we've got
right?
2022,
2022, 22. All right, yeah, by
23, 24,
2026.
25, 26. Okay, by 20. Okay, so 2026. So 5 years. All right. It could happen. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I mean, let's see. They'll bring Jalen Tyson along. I think what they should do is kind of try to. Well, I think he'll build a championship level team. I'm not necessarily sold on this year's team. I think the Ramey Jones pairing. I'm not a huge fan of. You mentioned with Remy Martin, inefficient chucker, and Timmy Allen was, a little
That's true.
bit of that when he was at Utah. So I don't love him being, necessarily, he. I would say Ramey's the best player on the team, but like I'm not a huge Timmy Allen fan as
I mean,
well.
Allen did shoot 46% from the field. That's a little better than Remy Martin's like 41.
It's not that much better. And he shot 26% from three, which mediocre. Uh, and Disu and Bishop, I'm not, a huge fan on the front court. I'm
I
just
love Disu. I'm a big Disu guy. Led the SEC in rebounding. Good athlete, can stretch the floor. Could be a first round pick with a really good season at Texas.
could be, but he was also playing on Vanderbilt.
That's true.
So I mean, could just be, someone has to get 15 points and 9 rebounds a game. So I'm a little less sold on Texas, uh, at least right now. They if they go out and they maybe win the Big 12 next season, I could see it happening. I'm just not going to predict it.
I'm buying the hype, but I understand your skepticism at the moment.
And then Chris Beard as well. Win me a national championship. Then I'll buy the hype.
Okay, come on. You sound like a Texas Tech fan.
I'm just saying Scott Drew has infinitely more national championships than Chris Beard.
Texas Tech fans act like Chris Beard went in there and won like 8 games for 5 straight years, and they're like, "Oh, he's not even that good of a coach." I'm like, "Yeah, that's like what you say about like like I guess when you're like in like high school, I guess, or something, and I tweeted this when it happens, like girl breaks up with you or something, you're like, I didn't like her that much anyways. That's what Texas Tech fans are like about Chris Beard.
Yeah,
Chris Beard broke
that's
up with Lubbock, Texas, and they're like, I didn't like him that much anyways, which clearly you did, because I guarantee you every Texas Tech fan in the world was like, I mean, I wouldn't hate it if he stayed, for sure. I mean, I think Mark Adams going to do a good job. They have a solid roster, but there's no doubt that Chris Beard is a better coach than Mark Adams.
yeah. He's miles better.
And like Mark Adams could be a great coach, but Mark Adams is not the reason Texas Tech went to the national championship. I know Texas Tech fans think that it's not true.
Well, clearly, if Mark Adams hadn't implemented his defensive scheme, they would have lost in the Elite Eight to Gonzaga.
Oh yeah, of course. Like
So I
Texas
mean,
Tech fans are just on a different level of salty about losing Chris Beard. It's crazy.
Mark Adams is clearly the reason why, because his defensive scheme forced Josh Perkins to call a timeout when he had none. That's exactly why they made it to the
Hmm.
national championship game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and Texas Tech, I mean, great defense on guarding DeAndre Hunter in the corner. That with like 14 seconds left.
Just awesome.
Just that was stellar defense. I mean, that was such a tough shot by DeAndre Hunter. There was someone right in his face, of course, and he just was able to make it.
Yeah, I mean, better offense beats no defense.
Yep.
All right, and okay, UCLA. I know you have them a little
Okay.
low.
Yeah.
One, I all right. Here's my question here. You have them 16. I can buy
Hmm.
that. I can buy that
Yeah.
if Johnny Juzang's not on the roster.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. Here's the thing about UCLA. They lost their final 4 games of the regular season. I mean, and the Pac-12 tournament. So final three of the regular season, they lost to Oregon State in the Pac-12 tournament, and they won 4 games in the NCAA tournament. So let's say they never come back against Michigan State, a game they're down at halftime in the first four. Let's say that never happens. Let's just act like Michigan State just wins. Nobody has UCLA ranked, probably. So that's kind of where I'm like, this, and that's not disrespecting any other people. I get why people have UCLA top 3, 4, 5. It makes sense. I just don't. And I think, I'll probably end up being wrong on this one. UCLA will probably be better than the 16th team in the country, but I just, how much of their current, the way people see them is because of what they did in the NCAA tournament. They were a pretty mediocre team for most of last season. Johnny Juzang was not that good most of last season, and he had a really good. I think Johnny Juzang's a very good player. He's not a first round pick. He might not even be an NBA draft pick. That's why I think he's coming back. But UCLA was painfully mediocre for most of last season. I mean, Taj Edey hitting that three. I had a UCLA fan say, "Oh, if Taj Edey doesn't hit that three, they're safely in the tournament." No, I wouldn't say safely. They'll be like a 10 seed, probably, maybe still an 11 seed. But they almost missed the NCAA tournament for a reason. That wasn't an accident.
Yeah, but they luckily had Louisville to miss the NCAA tournament instead. But speaking on that like UCLA front, I get what you're saying. But if Juzang is back, I think they're a top 10 team because he's just an elite scorer. Now, if Juzang ultimately, you have Chris Smith and Johnny Juzang are in the NBA, I think 16 is fair because Tiger Campbell I think is a good role point guard. He's not going to do anything spectacular.
He can't
Jaime,
shoot. I'll say that.
yeah, Jaime Jaquez is uh, I think he's going to be an all Pac-12 level player. He's very good. Peyton Watson, I think he'll be good, but we've seen freshmen struggle before, so I mean, you can envision a scenario where he struggles. Jules Bernard, Jake Kamen will just kind of they'll be the shooting guard and six man off the bench, and then you've got the Cody Riley, Miles Johnson, 10 fouls, between them show. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's an interesting roster. I think if Juzang and Smith are back, UCLA
Smith
should
is
be a
gone.
top.
There's no way Chris Smith is coming back.
Yeah,
He
I
entered
mean,
the NBA draft. He wouldn't have done that off a torn ACL if he planned on coming back. If Chris Smith and Johnny Juzang are back, fine. I'll put him top 5. I agree. They're a top 5 team.
yeah,
But that's just not going to happen.
yeah. I think if Juzang's back, they need. I would say definitely be top 10. That's kind of like my major gripe. But again, like if Johnny Juzang stays in the NBA draft, which I currently have projected, if Chris Smith stays in the NBA draft, I mean, 16 I think is fair.
If Juzang leaves, I'll probably have them 20, like third, second, maybe. But like the margin between like 11 and 16 really isn't that much. I mean, hey, who do I have 11th? Memphis. I could have Memphis 16 and UCLA 11. I would be like, okay, well, they're pretty close. I could see myself getting down with that. And I'm much higher on Memphis than most people. That's just where I am with them. And the thing about ranking teams in June, and of course, you and I can have good conversations about it because we're both, level-minded people when discussing things. We don't have bias in the situation. But when fans get angry, here's what I'm like. Look, I'm probably going to be wrong. That's what it comes down to. It's June. Nobody's ranking from June is going to look good next March. It's just not going to.
Well, some certain teams could be ranked properly. I mean,
Well,
if
certain. Yeah,
Memphis ends
I had
up the
Gonzaga
11th
first.
best team, I mean, you look like a genius. So I mean,
Yeah. And I didn't rank Ohio State 17th and UCLA 16th to get a rise out of people. I just genuinely think that they're a little overrated. So that's where I have them. I think Memphis is better. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but people think that I just some people, like, it's not just with me, it's with all writers. Some fans just get too, uh get look too much into rankings in June when, rankings at the end of the day are just an exercise to evaluate teams. And when you get into June, when you get into next, December, January, and UCLA is a top 5 team, I won't be surprised. Like, I will be the first to admit I was wrong.
yeah. Um, Looking here, okay, you have North Carolina at 24.
Mm.
I'm really kind of high on North Carolina. I like
Yeah,
the
I'm not.
team fit. I think Caleb Love, I'll say this. I think Caleb Love takes a big step forward.
Well,
Uh,
25 though, top 25. That I feel like that means I'm high on them. Like most people probably have UN. Like you're higher on them than me, but I feel like most people have UNC like 20 to 25.
Probably fair. I'm just really high on them, and I'll say this: I really like the team construction. I think Caleb Love's in for a big breakout season. Uh, Brady Mack, I think, is a perfect modern day four man for them. I really like Kerwin Walton. I think Big Hot, now that he's not having to you know split minutes with Walker Kessler and Garrison Brooks and you know,
Dayron Sharp.
yeah, Dayron Sharp, like there were almost just too many front court people for
Not almost. There was.
there was t- there was at least one and maybe too many good front court players in the
And
front court right
Garrison
now.
Brooks was the fourth best big man on that team, and I will die on that hill forever.
Yeah, I think if you rank them, I would go Sharp, Baycott, Kessler,
Kessler,
Garrison
Brooks.
Brooks.
Like if Garrison Brooks wasn't a senior, he's never playing. He was the fourth best big man on that team. There's no question about it in my mind.
Yeah, although Roy always did give like random minutes to people like Garrison Brooks who are like, well, this kid could be a 4 year guy, so I need to give him 15 minutes a game.
Yeah, I
Which,
mean, look, Garrison Brooks is really good in 2019, 2020, but then you look at how bad that team was. Somebody had to be good. Like, come on.
yeah, someone's got to score the points.
Yeah, like that team was so bad. It was just like the fact that North Carolina was that bad, and then the next season Kentucky was somehow even worse is just crazy to me.
Were they worse? Maybe.
Close.
It wasn't good. But yeah, I'm high on North Carolina. It could be to a fault, but I I, I had them as a 3 seed. I think back when I did a bracket in May, I still have them as 3 seed. I think they're pretty good. Uh, I think yeah, I'm high on North Carolina. I'll say this, and I'll also note this. I think the margins between you know, I think Gonzaga and Villanova deserve to be 1 seeds, but you have Oregon at fifth. I think
Yeah.
there's a valid argument behind that, and yeah, I think what I'm kind of looking at is I don't think the margins between like the fourth or fifth best team in the country and the you know 18th best team in the country is that big this
I
year.
actually agree. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was kind of the case last year too.
Yeah, and then I think there's kind of like I think there's a kind of major dip after maybe like around the 25 mark. Like you have North Carolina, Indiana next to each other. Now, it could just be I'm really high on North Carolina, but I think there's like a massive difference in those two teams. Like St. Bonaventure at 23, I think is way better than Indiana. I think Tennessee's I don't know what to think about Tennessee, honestly. Like Tennessee and Auburn or not Tennessee and Xavier are two teams. I'm like I don't really have a good feel on these two teams hanging next season.
Yeah, I agree with you on Tennessee. I trust what Xavier has talent wise with Paul Scruggs coming back, especially Tennessee. I feel like it could be much better than where I would have in 22. I think they could easily be a top 10 team in the country if things pan out, but I want to see it on the court first. And kind of like what I was saying before, like definitely appreciate everybody that reads my rankings and Jonathan's brackets and just all college basketball fans in general. But like nobody's rankings on things are going to be the same. Everybody has different opinions. So that's just kind of what it comes down to. Like some people have Kansas second probably, and Kansas fans are gonna love it. They're gonna hate that I have them 12th. Like it's just kind of how it is. And I get being a fan. That's just you're always gonna be a little biased towards your team. but I genuinely do not dislike any team in college basketball. So, like, when I rank a team lower, it's not because I hate them. I just think they're not as good. Like, that's just what it is.
Yeah. Uh, Also, you have Arkansas 18.
Yeah, I don't
I
love
guess
that
I
ranking.
have
I don't
them,
like that rank. I'm gonna be honest. I don't.
but you're the captain of the Devo Davis fan club. So I mean,
Yeah,
I feel like you need to arbitrarily bump Arkansas up a few spots.
I thought about it, but then I'm like, who do I move down? I'm just like, I'll have them
Houston.
18. But like Arkansas, their roster is so different from last season. I'm just like, again, let me see it on the court first, and then I'll move you up to top 10.
We'll flip Houston and Arkansas. Sound like a deal?
No, because like Kelvin Sampson wins with whatever he has. I'm not
But
saying Eric Musselman can't, but
Jared
I
Boyd
trust Kelvin
Mossbucks.
Sampson. I think Eric Musselman's a great coach. I just think Kelvin Sampson is a better coach.
All right. I don't know who could you necessarily bump bonk down. Uh,
Some of these teams are just so close, like you said. It's just like
yeah. You're just like picking almost what style or something you like almost. Like
yeah,
you
like
see something that someone else doesn't see. Like you could say, okay, well, I think Duke's a second best team in the country because I think Mark Williams is going to turn into a all or all American level center. Like you could
mhm.
rationalize that. You could
yeah.
easily be wrong, but I mean, you can rationalize it, I guess.
I think I agree. I think it's always important to read what like not just look at the ranking, but look at what people have to say about the ranking. Like I have Purdue third, which I think is higher than what most people have them, but I think Jaden Ivey is going to be a first team All American. So I'm projecting that he's going to have a big season because I love the talent there. He really showed out late in the season after a pretty rough first couple months of the year, and I think he's going to be a first team All American candidate, Big Ten Player of the Year. And if he doesn't, Purdue won't be the third best team in the country. That's just what it is. But I think that is what he can do, and that's kind of what I see happening. But if it doesn't, Purdue won't be the third best team in the country.
Yeah, and Purdue, I'll say this: like looking forward to next season, I think they have a chance at like two All Americans because
I do too.
Travion Williams and Jaden Ivey could both be All Americans.
Yep, 100%. I love Purdue's roster. If Jaden Ivey doesn't take that rise, they won't be that good. They'll be a tournament team. They'll be like a 5 or 6 seed. If they take that rise, Purdue could be a 1 seed
Yeah, probably end up being a 2 seed
or a one
because
seed.
we'll see. We'll see. Uh, Gonzaga, I think you just have to rank them number one.
You have to.
Doesn't mean they're going to win the national championship, but they're the best team on paper heading into next season.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty clear. I feel like that they're the best team in college basketball on paper entering next year.
All right. Eight last things you want to discuss before we get into some Twitter questions.
Now let's get into it.
All right. Let's see here. Uh, Steel City Baller with the three in place of the last E. Will a CAA ever get back to where it was a decade ago? If so, what will it take? I don't think so, personally. Uh, you you're just gonna need a right now the teams just aren't quite good enough. Like Northeastern has been solid over the past few years. Charleston, I think, could take a step back. You've got Drexel, Hofstra. Like the teams are competitive and good, but they're like 14 seed level good and not
Mhm.
anything more than that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it'll take a while to get there. I think Charleston's in for a big time season. Pat Kelsey's going to turn them into a really good team. But when you look at what the CAA was a decade ago, they still had VCU. They still had George Mason, Old Dominion. These are a lot of teams that have moved up conferences since then. So just the way conference realignment happens, it's always going to change how good a conference can be. And they're just at a different level without those teams in the conference.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, the CAA, I just don't see ever. Maybe at some point they become like a two-bid league or something like that, but I don't think it'll be kind of what it was in the past.
No, no, definitely won't be.
Let's see. The coin zero. He has many questions. The top four in the the Missouri Valley is pretty clear, but rank Missouri State, Loyola, Chicago, Drake, and UNI.
Should I go first or should you?
You can go first.
All right, I'll go Drake. They return first. Obviously, they return everybody except for Joseph Yesufu. Tank Hemphill will be back for his free year. Roman Penn hopefully is healthy. Which I'm assuming he was. It's not like a long-term injury. Darnell Brody, Tremel Murphy is coming back. Jonah Jackson's coming back. Garrett Sturts is coming back. This is going to be a really solid Drake team once again next season. Darian DeVries has a really good squad in his hands again. They're going to be an NCAA tournament team. Two, I have Loyola Chicago. Drew Valentine has a solid squad year one, but I do have a few questions. Obviously, they get a lot of their free year seniors back, all of them except for Cameron Krutwig. How do you replace Cameron Krutwig? I like getting Chris Knight from Dartmouth, but he had a torn Achilles. Will he be 100% healthy for the start of the season? If not, can Jacob Hudson be that guy at the 5? Because so much of what Loyola Chicago did the past 2 or 3 years was relying on Cameron Krutwig being that point center kind of player. Can they have a guy that can do that, or are they going to have to adjust their philosophy a little bit? And Drew Valentine's going to be able to coach at that defense and make them really dangerous on that end of the ball once again. Third, this is a tough one. I'm going to go UNI. AJ Green had a hip injury, missed almost all of last season. They get him back. They get Trey Burhow back. They get Austin Fife back. Noah Carter entered the transfer portal but withdrew, so he's back. Bowen Bourne showed flash in his freshman season. Nate Heisey showed flashes in his freshman season. I think that UNI is going to be a really solid team next year. They are definitely the most lethal offense in the conference. That defense is going to leave a little bit to be desired, of course. That's just kind of what it is. But that offense is going to be very scary. And Missouri State is fourth. I like the roster. I like Gage Prim and Isaiah Mosley quite a bit. Jamonte Black can shoot the ball from outside really well. I think the Missouri State Bears are going to be a solid team next year, but I have them fourth.
Yeah, I almost have the exact same. I have Drake number one. I think you mentioned all the players coming back. You even forget Tucker DeFries, who coaches them.
That is true.
So,
Yeah.
I think they're the clear, obvious pick, especially, you don't have Cameron Krutwig, who's going to do Cameron Krutwig things. I think they'll be fine. Like, Lucas Williamson is elite wing defender. They have, like, Braden Norris, Keith Clemens, Tate Hall, Marquise Kennedy they'll make enough shots. And you hear a Guac, I think that's how you'd pronounce it. He'll kind of defend inside. I think they'll be good, but I think they'll take a step back. Probably be like an NCAA tournament bubble team, whereas I think Drake's a NCAA tournament team. I think I'm going to go with Missouri State. There's always these like questions coming off a major injury like AJ Green suffered last season. So I mean, if he comes back and is what it was 2 seasons ago, I could see Northern Iowa being better than Missouri State. I could see Northern Iowa being an NCAA tournament level team. It's hard to bet on health coming back off a big injury. That said, that's why I have Northern Iowa at 4 and Missouri State at 3. But I could see Northern Iowa being a tournament team this year. I think all four of these teams. Maybe Missouri State has the least chance of making the NCAA tournament of these four teams, but I mean, I think all four could make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was really high on Northern Iowa a year ago. Obviously, they started the year 0-3, and then AJ Green got hurt, so it's just a disaster. But I think that they'll be a lot better than they were last year.
All right. Let's see. Should we stick with the coin or go to Mr. Sherbet?
His other question was about the OVC, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with the OVC. I don't remember what it was, but I remember reading it.
Let's see. Could the OVC be a two-bid conference? Again, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's this year.
I think it could be actually. Murray State has a really tough non-conference schedule, and I like that Murray State team quite a bit. Their starting five is dangerous with Trey Hannibal at the one coming in from South Carolina. You have Carter Collins coming in from Davidson. You have Tevin Brown returning at the three. You have Elijah Farr, a JUCO player who is really fun to watch, athletic, and shoot the ball strong. And at the five, you have KJ Williams. That's a really good starting five. If they can win some of those tough non-conference games and then be really good in conference play, and then Belmont wins the conference tournament, I think that's how you get two bids.
Yeah, and I think it could be, any like Belmont could be that team. Murray State could be that team. I don't know if necessarily like it'll be this year or not, but all you really need to do is have like one team who's like a clear NCAA tournament team, no doubter, NCAA tournament team, make it into the NCAA tournament and then lose in the OVC tournament. So I mean, I think at some point the OVC will be a two-bid league again, probably within the next 10 years, I would say, because that's really all you need. And you don't necessarily need two great teams. You can really just have one great team in, let's say they get upset in the OVC tournament, you can still get another team in. You look at past two seasons, East Tennessee State, Wofford could have lost in their respected conference tournaments. Now, of course, they didn't. And then you would have had two-bid SoCon. So, I mean,
Two-bid SoCon would have been fun. And, we could have and probably should have had a two-bid SoCon anyways, but UNCG got robbed.
that's the hill you're going to die on.
Yeah, I will, because they got absolutely robbed.
I don't think any. I want to say like most every bracketologist didn't have them in.
No, most bracketologists were wrong. That's what I'll say.
All right, fair enough. Last question from the coin zero.
You had
What
three? Jeez.
I know.
He has like 98% of the questions.
What mid major what mid major schools are we most looking forward to / flying under the radar, being like a potential bubble team?
Loyola Marymount.
Loyola Marymount. We talked on them earlier. Iona.
Iona, yeah, I think it'll be tough for them to be a like an at-large bubble team, but I definitely think they're going to make the tournament because I don't think they're going to lose a game in conference play. I think the three teams in the Mountain West, Nevada, Colorado State, and San Diego State, they'll all compete for an at-large bid in my eyes. And then when you look at some of the other conferences like the SoCon, I think Samford is going to be really good. They add Quest Glover from Florida. They add Wesley Cardet, he was a top 100 recruit. I think he's like 115th now. But Samford, in a SoCon that looks a lot different than it did last year with Wes Miller off to Cincinnati. I think that Samford could definitely compete in the SoCon. But East Tennessee State, I think they could be the favorites in the SoCon too. Desmond Oliver, in his first year as the head coach of ETSU, has a really solid squad on his hands. And then another team I'll just mention is Winthrop. They lost Chandler Vaudrin. They lose their head coach, Pat Kelsey, to Charleston, but they had a lot of good pieces on that Winthrop team also, so they should be the favorites in the Big South once again.
All right. Two more for me. San Francisco, of course. Todd Golden's
Todd
the
Golden.
head coach. They also have Khalil Shabazz coming back, so
And Jamari Boyer's back for the free year.
All right, Jamari Bouyea. They also have Patrick Toupe, Zane Meeks, Josh Coonan. I mean, this is
Gabe
a dynasty.
Stefanini from Columbia.
This is a team built to not only beat Gonzaga but win the national championship as well.
Yeah. Ewan Masalski from San Diego. Zane Meeks from Nevada.
Yeah.
Todd Golden's doing work.
All right, a team I could maybe see being a high major team that gets a at-large bid, maybe Ohio.
There's a lot of high major teams that get at-large bids.
Or true mid-majors. Not
well, you said high major.
Yeah. My bad. True mid-majors, Ohio. I think they could get a auto bid, not an auto bid, at-large bid. Jason Preston's a superstar. If they go out and win a few games in non-conference play, get getting upset here or there. I mean, you've looked at the MAC before, and Buffalo in 2019 was a 6 seed. So I mean, they obviously would have been an at-large team had they decided to lose their conference tournament. Of course, they dominated their conference tournament because they were just a 6 seed going against a bunch of MAC schools. So I mean, they dominated that. But I could see Ohio maybe being an at-large team from the MAC.
Yeah, I could see it. And, obviously, like the A10, they're always a league that's going to have multi bids, more than likely. Richmond's going to be in that mix. They return Jacob Gilliard. Nick Sherrod is back off his torn ACL. Grant Golden, Nate Ko. They're all back. Tyler Burton to round out the starting five. St. Bonaventure, I feel like, is a lock to make the tournament at this point. VCU, I would have had up there last week, but Ace Baldwin, I might have been an Achilles injury. He had an injury that's going to sideline him for a while. So VCU probably not in that mix anymore.
All right. I mean, you look at the leagues like WCC, A10, Mountain West. Like you kind of come to expect those leagues to get multiple bids, but uh, it's like the true mid majors.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
kind of taking the question.
I'll name another one. Louisiana. They've added a lot of good pieces this offseason. Jordan Brown coming in, Cedric Russell back for the free year, Greg Williams from St. John's coming in, Jalen Dalcourt from San Jose State, Antoine Jones from Creighton also coming in. They added a ton of pieces this offseason. They're the best team in the Sun Belt. They returned Theo Akuba also. They're going to be the favorites in their conference. And if things go well, maybe they're an at-large team.
Who knows? You never know.
Two-bit Sun Belt.
2 bid Sun Belt, 2 bid MAC, 2 bid Sun Belt, 4 bid
Yeah.
WCC, uh,
Two-bit Big Ten.
2 bid Big Ten, 1 bid ACC,
Mm-hmm. Eight,
uh,
12 bid Pac-12.
12 bid Pac-12. Yeah, we got all this. Let's see. Two more, I guess, both from the Sure Bet Scoop. First off, what teams are dark horses to make run in the tournament? Um,
Arizona,
Arizona. Oh,
Memphis, Washington State. Those are three I really like.
yeah, Washington State.
Big fan of Washington State.
I like Colorado State. Like their
Me
team.
too.
They had they not lost, I think they played like a game late in the season that
A
the Mountain
meaningless
West.
game.
Yeah, the Mountain West made them make up, and that's why they didn't make the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I mean, if they make the NCAA tournament in the first four, we're probably talking about Colorado State being a come off a tournament bid. We're talking about Colorado State being like, okay, these guys are very good. So I mean, that's they're that close to being like highly talked about heading into this season, but because they missed the NCAA tournament and uh, I think they made to the Final Four of the NIT. I want to say they
Mm-hmm.
pushed
They lost to
Memphis pretty well.
Memphis. Yeah, they lost
Yeah,
to Memphis. It was close, I think, though.
yeah. So I mean, you're returning basically everyone. I think Colorado State's a team that can take a big jump, and I think I had them as a seven
Five seed.
seed. I had them as a 7 seed,
I
but
have them 20th in the country, so.
all right. So again, I hate Colorado State, but they're a sleeper team. They're a sleeper
Why do you
team
hate Colorado State?
because I don't have them top 20.
Oh,
I'm a
okay.
hater.
And then be like, geez, let's not hate on Colorado State.
I only have them top 30.
All right, well,
I
that's a little
clearly hate them.
disrespectful, but it's okay.
I hate them clearly.
Yep.
Um, and what conference are we most excited to watch?
Um,
You can't say Pac-12. No Pac-12 talk.
Let me
We,
think. I
we
guess.
already know the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Conference of Champions, but I won't say that for this one. Uh, let's think here. Um, The Ivy League. No, just kidding. Uh, I, I'll say the WCC. I think they're going to be improved this year. So I'm going to go with the WCC.
Okay. Yeah, I like the WCC. Uh, I think Gonzaga has some. I still think they're like way better than everyone, but they
Oh,
also
yeah.
have like real competition. Like I think BYU is going to be much improved. We've talked about Todd Golden leading San Francisco to multiple national championships here within the next 5 years. You obviously have St. Mary's. So, I mean, Loyola Marymount, like the league is stacked there.
Yep. 100%.
Um, let's see. In terms of a high major league, I kind of like the SEC. A lot of really good teams. I think the conference race is going to be fun. Um, Going more mid-major, uh, I do really like the Mountain West, especially with those two-horse races. Nevada and Colorado State, I think, will just kind of run away with that league. Uh, Elsewhere, I'm interested in the Sun Belt, the SoCon. Uh, but my pick, gonna go with the Missouri Valley. We kind of touched on it earlier. You have Loyola Chicago, you've got Drake. They could be at-large bid teams. You've obviously got AJ Green back. Northern Iowa could be an at-large team. So I think the Missouri Valley is going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, if I pick a high major conference, it would definitely be the SEC.
Yeah, it's SEC is going to be besides the Pac-12.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Um, I think that's it on Twitter questions. Speaking of the Pac-12, Jacob Young is heading to Oregon, so I think we kind of did a good job holding off on Oregon talk. But you now have them number 5 in the nation. We just
Hmm.
missed that, but very good pickup. You now have 3 ball handler guards that will. It kind of reminds me of 2005 Illinois, just 3 elite ball handlers who can kind of do different things well. And I think Oregon's definitely going to be a good team. I think I have them as a 4 seed, so I'm a little lower, but I think they're a clear, top 20 team in basketball, and Jacob Young just adds to that. They're going to be very good next season.
Yeah, they've had a great transfer class with Davion Harmon, Quincy Guerrier, and now Jacob Young. Those are three of the top 35 transfers available. I'd say Guerrier is a top 5 transfer. Harmon probably top 25, and Young probably like top 30. So they've had a really good transfer class. Will Richardson's back. They had Nate Biddle, a 5-star recruit. They get Nafali Dante back from injury. Frank Kepnang back. Eric Williams back. This is just a loaded team. Oh, and Rivaldo Soares from South Plains Community College. So this is a really good Oregon roster. Dana Altman, another great coach. Oregon, in my eyes, is certainly the best team in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think we kind of need to wait and see on UCLA's roster situation, but I mean, if Juzang and Smith both stay in the NBA, I would say Oregon's the team to be in that league.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
And they have a better coach. So
Maybe, but
no, they
I
do.
guess they have the same amount of Final Fours, so they're tied there.
I would take Dana if I was starting a team and you're like, well, you can have Dana Altman or Mick Cronin. I take Dana Altman and don't even hesitate.
All right. Um, yeah, I can see that. I think they're pretty equal, but I think the next 5 years will really see kind of because now both programs are kind of in the same spot, and I think it comes down to coaching here in the next 5 years. We'll see if Mighty Mick can catch Dana Altman.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see.
Let's see. Uh, both Booth Gotch and Dusan Moroich, probably pronounced that wrong. They're both off to
Think
Utah.
it's Mohorchich, but I'm also not sure. I'm probably also saying it wrong. That's just how it looks though.
They're off to Utah. Utah, there's not a lot of high end upside talent, but I mean, you look at this team. I think Craig Smith is as the head coach. The Pac-12 will soon be seeing Utah. I think contending for NCAA tournament spots in the near future.
Yeah, I agree. I think Craig Smith's going to do a really good job. Utah's a solid roster. They're not a tournament team, but for some real in-depth analysis, you can go ahead and watch what I say about it on the Making the Madness YouTube channel. Definitely like and subscribe while you're there too.
Definitely do that. Let's see. Trey Wade is off to Arkansas. I think a
Also, a
good
video
wing
on that.
fit. Yeah. Uh, good wing fit. I don't think he's necessarily a world beater, but uh, you just have a guy who can, I think, play defense, rebound, brings physical toughness. So I think that's a
Yeah,
good fit there.
good glue guy for sure. Arkansas is going to be a really good defensive team. Devo Davis is the best returning defender in the country. Jalen Williams is a really good post defender, and Trey Wade is a steady defender on the perimeter, and he can guard inside if you need him to. So Arkansas is going to be a team that is very loaded on the defensive end next year.
And speaking of teams, first off, replacing Charles Bassey going to be tough, but Western Kentucky, they have Jalen Butts now. Uh, all problems are solved. They also have Zion Harmon and Davion McKnight. So, I mean, those are probably better fill ins, but I mean, Western Kentucky could be good again next season, could win their league.
Yeah, Josh Anderson also back for the free year. I think overall, give me UAB and Louisiana Tech ahead of Western Kentucky, but in the uh, in the Conference USA, it's always kind of the top five. Anybody can win it.
Yeah. They also have Noah Stansberry, who is now a freshman. So he could be
Oh,
good.
okay. Yeah, totally.
Anything before we sign off here?
No, I think that's about it for me.
All right. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Making the Madness podcast. We will be back maybe with some more transfer talk, probably some less ranking talk. But if you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe on podcasts, then go subscribe on YouTube, then go follow us on Twitter, and then whatever else you can do. Uh, thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, thanks again.